It's 6 p.m. on a Friday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's begin with the headlines. President Park Geun-hye emphasizes the need to enforce stronger budget reforms to ensure the government's finances stand strong as the backbone of the nation's economic recovery. North Korean Foreign Minister Ri Su-yong claims the regime needs to develop nukes to defend itself from the annual Seoul-Washington joint military drills, calling them nuclear war rehearsals against a communist state. And a South Korean passenger train heading to Yeosu from Seoul derails, killing one engineer and injuring 8 passengers. At an annual meeting held at the top office of Cheongwade, the government has vowed stronger budget reforms that will strengthen control over the allocation and execution of taxpayers' money. Our Song Ji-sun starts us off with Korea's financial strategy for the future.
Improving the nation's financial health to prep for a future with slowing growth. The focus of this year's financial strategy meeting was on long-term analysis to counter future risks ahead of time. Chairing the annual meeting held to discuss next year's budget, President Park Geun-hye stressed that the government's finances must be the strong backbone of economic recovery, with uncertainties at home and abroad expected to increase in the years to come. With Korea's rapidly aging society, coupled with a rise in welfare demand and a fall in potential growth, the nation's debt-to-GDP ratio is expected to top 40% this year for the first time. The government has vowed all-out reform efforts to effectively manage Korea's finances through SMART, which stand for Strategy, Merge, Autonomy, Restructuring, and Technology, for a more strategic distribution of resources.
국가 재정은 4대 구조 개혁과 경제 혁신 3개년 계획을 차질 없이 뒷받침해서 성과를 구체화하고 그 열매를 국민들에게 돌려드려야 합니다.
Korea will reinforce its fiscal regulations for stricter budget controls and present a related bill to the National Assembly for approval in the latter half of this year. Seoul would then reinvest the funds to spur new growth engines in an effort to stabilize public livelihood. The central government will also press local governments to be more responsible for their budget operations and also give the nation's 17 innovation centers a greater role so they can create more jobs through employment zones launched in each branch. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
As the Korean government and the nation's political parties prepare to shake up the corporate sector, more gloomy data continues to fuel that drive. The country's top central banker has vowed to lay out measures to stem any possible financial instabilities that could erupt from sweeping restructuring efforts. Hwang Jae has the numbers and more.
The eye-watering losses Korea's shipbuilding industry saw last year have resulted in 15,000 people leaving their jobs. According to industry sources, the labor force of local shipbuilding companies shrunk by around 10,000, while the number of workers employed by subcontractors of those firms slid by 5,000. Shipbuilding is one of the 5 industries the government has identified as problem sectors in dire need of restructuring. The other 4 are shipping, construction, steel, and petrochemicals. With the global economy still in the doldrums and crude oil prices hanging low, the outlook for these industries this year remains glum. With that, Korea's corporate restructuring drive has been gaining momentum, with the government as well as the ruling and opposition parties gearing up to form a consultative body to discuss the issue. Korea's Finance Minister Yoo Il-ho welcomed the move on Friday, saying that he will actively cooperate with the body to accept new ideas. Meeting with the leaders of Korea's commercial banks the same day, the country's top central banker Lee Ju-yeol also said the Bank of Korea will lay out measures to counteract potential financial instabilities that could be prompted by the corporate shakeup. While expressing concerns over a possible decline in the banking sector's profitability, he added the government's push for corporate reforms may further aggravate existing problems. The BOK chief did say, though, that local banks will be able to overcome such difficulties as they currently have enough capacity built in to absorb the losses. Hwang Jae, Arirang News.
Just 1 month to go before the end of the 19th extraordinary session. With the clock ticking on the current parliament, Korea's rival political parties are voicing the need for economic revitalization. Shin Se-min has the updates.
As the clock winds down on the 19th parliament, Korea's rival political parties are making a final push on efforts to stop economy-related bills from being terminated. The ruling Saenuri Party stressed the need to swiftly pass labor reform bills as a prerequisite to thorough corporate restructuring.
4 labor reform bills and bills aimed at deregulating the service sector are some of the core economy-related bills that need to be passed swiftly.
The interim chief of the main opposition Minju Party of Korea, however, claims the government should take the initiative and devise a blueprint on how to set up and execute restructuring of the country's economy.
As the opposition political party, it's a difficult task for us to execute corporate restructuring. We urge the government to closely monitor the country's economic circumstances.
Kim Jong-un, the party's interim leader, added that it will form a special economy-related committee to come up with its own plan to tackle the country's economic issues. The Splinter People's Party, too, said it is crucial that the restructuring take place quickly to minimize any possible ripple effects on the market.
The government has wasted too much time and failed to offer a firm solution. Because of this, structural reforms are more necessary than ever.
Moreover, the People's Party expressed the need to tackle the issue from a macroeconomic perspective and said those involved in corporate restructuring should be fully compensated with unemployment pay. Although the opposition drive for corporate restructuring is seen as somewhat of an uncharacteristic stance, as it would entail a mass layoffs of the labor force, there seems to be an underlying consensus among political parties on the need for a shift in the country's economic policies. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Talks between the top nuclear envoys of South Korea and China are being held in Beijing just a day after U.S.-China talks. According to our Kwon So-ah, with North Korea's ongoing aggressive rhetoric, anticipation builds for three-way talks on the matter.
South Korea's top nuclear chief Kim Ong-gyun and his Chinese counterpart Woo Da-wei met for talks on North Korea in Beijing Friday, with a big focus on the implementation of sanctions on the regime. Kim was said to have stressed the importance of close communication with Beijing at this time, amid North Korea's violation of UN Security Council resolutions, citing its attempted test firing of a mid-range ballistic missile last week. The meeting comes just a day after Woo's one-on-one with Washington's representative to the six-party talks, Sung Kim, in which they expressed strong opposition to Pyongyang's irresponsible acts and concern regarding a possible fifth nuclear test.
Unfortunately, North Korea has shown no interest in working with us towards some credible and meaningful effort towards denuclearization.
Seoul's foreign ministry sees significance in the back-to-back bilateral talks, hoping that they pave the way for a three-way meeting soon, which, according to an official, China is said to be open to. But some experts doubt talks would bear much fruit.
I do believe three-way talks are needed, but there are differences between South Korea and the U.S. on how to respond to Pyongyang, as well as China's perspective. While Seoul remains focused on changing North Korea through sanctions, China wants North Korea included in six-party talks.
Given the severity of the North Korean situation, Seoul's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se is expected to address the issue at the Conference on Interaction and Confidence-Building Measures in Asia next week in Beijing. It's the first time Seoul sends its top diplomat to the forum, which promotes peace, security, and stability in Asia. There, Yoon is likely to hold bilateral talks with his Chinese and Russian counterparts, Wang Yi and Sergei Lavrov. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
North Korea's top diplomat has vowed that Pyongyang will counter U.S. nuclear threats with its own nuclear weapons. He also slammed Washington, saying it was plotting to launch a nuclear attack on the communist state. Park Jong-hong shares with us Lee Soo-young's remarks.
North Korea has unleashed more hostile rhetoric against the United States. Speaking in New York on Thursday, the regime's top diplomat Lee Soo-young slammed the U.S. for conducting what he calls nuclear war exercises to attack the North, apparently referring to the annual military drills between the U.S. and South Korea. As a consequence, Lee said his country developing nuclear weapons was inevitable in order to counter the nuclear threat posed by the U.S. The minister made the remarks during a keynote speech at a high-level meeting of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals at the UN headquarters. Lee claimed Pyongyang tried to have dialogue and made efforts through international law to remove the nuclear threat, but he said it was to no avail. He added North Korea will make sure the U.S. pays the price for hampering the North's sustainable development and urged Washington to immediately end its, quote, hostile policy toward Pyongyang. He also had some harsh words for the United Nations. He strongly protested the UN Security Council sanctions against the North, saying they are a challenge to the country's sustainable development. He vowed that North Korea will never give in to the sanctions. North Korea's foreign minister is in New York for the signing of a historic UN climate agreement set for Friday, local time. Park Jung-hong, Arirang News.
A passenger train derailed and partially flipped over in the southern province of Jeollanam-do early Friday morning. While investigation is still underway, excessive speed is believed to be the culprit of the accident. Yeosu has the latest.
At around 3:40 a.m. local time, a passenger train from the Mugunghwa line heading to the southern city of Yeosu from Seoul derailed and partially flipped over. The accident took place near Yulchon Station in Jeollanam-do province and resulted in the death of the head engineer, while 8 more people were injured and taken to a nearby hospital. Local police are reporting that the cause of the derailment was the excessive speed of 127 kilometers per hour at which the train was running when shifting tracks. According to guidelines, the train should have been traveling at 50 kilometers per hour top. Further investigation is underway. The Korea Railroad Corporation has suspended all train operations between Suncheon Station and Yeosu Expo Station for the time being. The recovery work is expected to take up to 20 hours, and train schedules are expected to normalize by Saturday morning. Yeosu, Arirang News.
Japan's self-defense forces and police began rescue operations in Kumamoto on Friday, focusing mostly on Minami Aso, a village devastated by a large landslide. Rescue operations have been suspended since Wednesday due to heavy rain. Most stores and gas stations resumed operations with power restored in most parts on Wednesday night. Last week's quakes and aftershocks left some 90,000 people displaced and destroyed around 10,000 homes. The Korean government delivered $100,000 worth of relief supplies on Friday. In less than a week since a devastating earthquake rattled Ecuador, another natural disaster let its presence felt in the country. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, a 6.0 magnitude quake struck 33 kilometers off the Ecuadorian coastline near the city of Bahia de Caracas at 3 a.m. on Thursday local time. President Rafael Correa said it is highly unlikely the quakes will cause a tsunami. The Ecuadorian leader hastened recovery efforts with damages estimated to be over $3 billion. The death toll has climbed to 580. It's been revealed Mitsubishi manipulated another of its models for fuel efficiency. According to Japan's Sankei Shimbun, a report submitted by the motor company showed that its iMIV also failed to comply with Japan's legal guidelines for testing fuel efficiency, on top of the inaccurate tests on 4 of its mini cars. The newspaper raised the possibility that the company may have manipulated its tire pressure figures to fabricate mileage rates. Meanwhile, the Financial Times said the scandal could cost Mitsubishi more than $1.5 billion. During the Korean War, selfless and courageous young men and women from all over the world put their lives on the line to fight for South Korea's freedom as a stranger in a strange land. 65 years have passed. Some of these war veterans were invited to revisit the country they helped build, and our Kim Ji-yeon got to meet some of them up close on a very special anniversary.
The Ministry of Patriots and Veteran Affairs invited 107 Korean War veterans and their families for a week-long stay to the country to commemorate the 65th anniversary of the Battle of Gapyeong and Imjingang River, some of the fiercest battles waged during the war. 59 British soldiers died while some 530 were captured by the enemy in the Battle of Indingang River in April of 1951. They valiantly battled to impede communist forces from taking over the Korean peninsula. As the veterans pay their respects to their fallen comrades, they recount memories of what they witnessed of the war and how far the country has come since.
When I come here in 1950, when I did, there wasn't a building standing because they were all bombed and shelled and everything like that. It was devastation. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Now, it's gorgeous.
In the Battle of Gapyeong on April 23rd to 25th, 1951, South Korean and UN troops outnumbered 5-1 slowed the advancement of Chinese communist forces into the southern part of the peninsula.
When we were coming in from Incheon, but I remember, and I'm going to show more when we go to Gapyeong. That's where I got wounded on the 24th and 25th of April 1951. I was wounded twice in the hip and once in the right ankle.
Today, the survivors trace the footsteps of the fallen back to the country that they risked their lives to protect.
All I could say about this country to my family and friends is that I do really give the Korean people 10 out of 10 for what they've done. I do really, because it's a beautiful country now. It is a beautiful country. Yes, yes, definitely.
Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
We've come to the end of our newscast. Thank you for watching.